My mother didn't just laugh as my penthouse burned. She raised her champagne, telling guests across the street that God was cleaning up a mess. Standing barefoot in the rain, I watched 12 years of my protection turn to ash. They treated my tragedy like entertainment, oblivious that the fire was consuming their only shield against prison. 1 year later, I returned to prove their empire is just a paper castle built on a volcano. My name is Isla Asherton. I was 32 years old, and until that night, my entire existence had been defined by the messes I cleaned up, not the life I lived. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. Outside, New York City was being battered by a freezing rain that turned the streets into slick, black mirrors. But inside my penthouse apartment, the air was dry and stale, smelling faintly of old dust and overheated electronics. I was sitting at my dining table, which was currently buried under a mountain of legal briefs and non-disclosure agreements. My father, Robert Asherton, the CEO of Asherton Holdings, had managed to get himself entangled in yet another sexual harassment lawsuit with a former intern, and as usual, the task of burying the story before the morning news cycle had fallen to me. I remember staring at the glow of my laptop screen, my eyes burning from exhaustion. I had not slept in 24 hours. My coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago. The only sound in the apartment was the aggressive rattling of the baseboard heater near the window. It had been making that noise for 6 months, a simple electrical fix. A normal person would have called a repairman weeks ago, but I was not a normal person. I was the unofficial crisis manager for a family that specialized in creating crises. Every time I set aside money or time to fix my own heating system, something more urgent came up. Leo idled his Porsche. Mom needed a 5-figure donation to silence a charity fraud accusation. Or Serena needed a PR team to scrub a racist tweet. So, I ignored the rattling. I ignored the faint smell of ozone that had been lingering in the living room for days. I prioritized their survival over my safety. That was the last mistake the old Isla ever made. It started with a sound that was less like an explosion and more like a heavy, singular thud, as if a body had dropped onto the floorboards. Then came the hiss. I looked up from the non-disclosure agreement just in time to see a spark arc from the heater, bright blue and angry, landing on the velvet curtains I had inherited from my grandmother. In seconds, the room was not a room anymore. It was an oven. The fire did not grow gradually. It fed on the old insulation and the dry drywall with a voracious hunger. I scrambled back, my chair screeching against the hardwood. Smoke, thick and oily, rolled across the ceiling like an inverted ocean. I lunged for the fire extinguisher in the kitchen, but the path was already blocked by a wall of orange heat that singed the eyebrows off my face. "Get out," I whispered to myself, the voice sounding strange and small in the roaring room. Just get out. I did not grab the laptop. I did not grab the hard drive containing the evidence of 12 years of tax fraud I had covered up for my mother. I did not even grab shoes. I ran. I ran through the hallway as the fire alarm finally decided to scream, a piercing shriek that vibrated in my teeth. I burst out into the stairwell, the heat chasing me like a physical predator, and scrambled down 12 flights of stairs, my bare feet slapping against the cold concrete. When I burst out onto the street, the shock of the freezing rain hit me like a physical blow. I collapsed onto the wet pavement, gasping for air, my lungs burning with the taste of soot and melted plastic. I was wearing nothing but a thin silk pajama set that was now stained with black ash. I shivered violently, not just from the cold, but from the adrenaline crash. I stood up, wiping the rain from my eyes, and looked back. My apartment, the penthouse of the pre-war building, was a torch. Flames were licking out of the shattered windows, reaching up into the night sky, painting the low-hanging clouds in violent shades of crimson and gold. It was terrifying. It was total destruction. Everything I owned, every personal memento, every scrap of privacy I had managed to carve out for myself, was gone. But that was not the tragedy. The tragedy was what I saw when I turned around. My building was situated directly across the street from the Regal Hotel, one of the most expensive venues in Manhattan. Tonight was the night of the annual Asherton Foundation Gala. I had organized it, of course. I had chosen the flowers, approved the menu, and drafted the speeches. But I had skipped attending because my father needed the lawsuit handled by morning. The hotel had a grand terrace on the second floor, overlooking the street. The guests had spilled out onto the balcony, drawn by the spectacle of the fire. They held crystal flutes of champagne, the jewels on their necks catching the reflection of my burning home. And there, front and center, was my family. I took a step toward them, an instinctive, childlike urge to run to my mother rising in my chest. I wanted her to wrap her fur coat around me. I wanted my father to yell at the firemen to move faster. I wanted to be saved. Then, I stopped. The street was narrow enough, and the acoustics of the city at night were strange enough, that I could see and hear them with crystal clarity, or perhaps the trauma sharpened my senses to a supernatural degree. My mother, Victoria Asherton, was not looking for me in the crowd. She was holding her phone up, the screen glowing against her perfectly made-up face. She was live streaming. I could see the ring light clipped to her phone. She was wearing the red Valentino gown I had bought for her. She raised her glass of champagne toward the inferno that was my life, and I heard her laugh. It was a tinkling, practiced laugh, the one she used when she wanted to charm a donor. "Can you believe the timing?" she said, her voice carrying over the sirens. "I was just telling the bishop that we need to cleanse the city of sin. And look, God is listening. That is the price of ingratitude. Darlings, the Lord always knows how to clean up the things that are eyesores." She was talking about my apartment. She was talking about me. I stood frozen, the rain soaking through my thin silk shirt, plastering it to my skin. I watched my father, Robert. He was standing next to her, looking annoyed. He brushed a speck of ash off his shoulder with a look of utter disgust. He leaned toward his personal assistant, a young man named Davis, and though I could not hear every syllable, I read his lips and his body language perfectly. He pointed at the smoke drifting toward them, then gestured to his suit, a custom Italian piece that cost $12,000. He was not asking if his daughter was alive. He was complaining that the smell of burning drywall was going to ruin his cashmere blend. And Serena, my 24-year-old sister, she turned her back to the fire. She adjusted her hair, puffing up her lips in a pout, and snapped a selfie. The flash illuminated her face, a mask of bored entitlement. I watched her tap the screen, posting it immediately. My phone, which I had somehow managed to clutch in my death grip during the escape, buzzed in my hand. It was the only thing I had saved. I looked down at the cracked screen. A text from Leo. "You seriously ruined Mom's vibe. She is pissed. Do not come over here asking for money. Dad says the insurance will not cover it because the building is technically a corporate asset, and you let the maintenance lapse. Good luck, Loel." I stared at the message. The words swam before my eyes. Good luck, Loel. Something inside my chest, something warm and beating and hopeful, simply stopped. It did not break. It evaporated. It was the part of me that was a daughter. It was the part of me that was a sister. For 12 years, I had been the glue holding this family together. I had hidden the affairs. I had paid the bribes. I had silenced the victims. I had stood between them and the consequences of their own moral rot. And now, as I stood barefoot on broken glass, watching my world burn, they were using the flames as background lighting for their social media content. I did not cry. The tears that had been threatening to spill only moments ago receded, sucked back into a dry, arid desert of sudden clarity. I looked up at the balcony one last time. I memorized the exact shade of red on my mother's lips. I memorized the frequency of her laugh. I memorized the way my father turned his back on the fire to order another drink. I memorized the caption I knew Serena had just written, "Cleansing bad energy. Bye-bye drama." A heavy hand landed on my shoulder. I flinched, turning to see a firefighter standing there. He looked exhausted, his face smeared with soot, his eyes filled with a pity I did not want. He was shouting to be heard over the roar of the water hoses. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you live in the building?" I nodded slowly. "Top floor." He looked me up and down, taking in the pajamas, the bare feet, the shivering. He glanced up at the balcony across the street, where the party was still in full swing, the laughter drifting down like poison. He seemed to recognize the Asherton family. Everyone in New York knew the Asherton family. He looked back at me, connecting the dots. "Is that your family over there?" he asked, gesturing toward the hotel. "Do you want me to escort you over?" "They probably don't know you're down here." I looked at the firefighter. Then I looked back at the balcony. Victoria was toasting again. Robert was laughing at a joke. They knew. They knew exactly where I was. They just didn't care. The cold rain felt different now. It didn't feel like misery. It felt like a baptism. I straightened my spine. I pushed my wet hair back from my face. I looked the firefighter dead in the eye. My voice steady, devoid of any tremor. "No," I said. "Ma'am, I don't know them," I lied, the words tasting like iron and freedom. "I don't have any family." The firefighter looked confused, but I didn't give him time to question me. "I am an orphan," I said, and for the first time in 32 years, it was the truest thing I had ever spoken. I turned away from the warmth of the fire. I turned away from the lights of the hotel. I turned away from the Asherton name. I started walking down the dark, rain-slicked avenue, my bare feet numb to the cold, stepping over the fire hoses and the debris. I had no shoes. I had no home. I had no credit cards. As I knew my father would cancel the corporate cards by morning, I walked into the shadows of the city, leaving Isla Asherton, the dutiful daughter, burning in the wreckage of the penthouse. The woman walking away was someone else entirely. She was a ghost, and ghosts, as my mother would soon learn, are very good at haunting the living. The motel room smelled of lemon disinfectant and stale cigarette smoke, a scent that clung to the cheap polyester bedspread like a second skin. It was located on the outskirts of Queens, wedged between a tire repair shop and a highway overpass that vibrated every time a semi-truck rumbled past. The cost was $89 a night. It was a steep drop from the $6,000 monthly maintenance fee of the penthouse I had lost 48 hours ago. But looking at the peeling wallpaper, I felt a strange, cold sense of appropriateness. This was not a home, it was a bunker. I sat on the edge of the bed, my back rigid. Staring at the wall, I had not cried. Crying was an expenditure of energy with a negative return on investment. Instead, I was conducting an audit. My first order of business that morning had been to assess my liquidity. I walked to the local bodega to buy a toothbrush, a stick of deodorant, and a cup of black coffee. When I tapped my platinum credit card, the one issued under the Asherton Family Trust, the machine let out a sharp, rejecting beep. I tried again. Another beep. The cashier, a bored teenager with headphones around his neck, looked at me with dull pity. I pulled out my phone and checked the banking app. Account suspended. Contact primary account holder. I stared at the screen. It had not even been 2 days. My father, Robert, had not just cut me off. He had severed the limb to save the body. He assumed that without their money, I would come crawling back, desperate and pliable, ready to apologize for the inconvenience of losing my home. He thought poverty would break me because he thought money was the source of my power. He was wrong. Money was just a tool. My power was my competence. I paid for the coffee with the $30 of cash I had in my pocket, the only physical money I had escaped with, and walked out. I went to work. Oberon Strategy was a boutique crisis management firm in Midtown, a place where billionaires and politicians came when they needed their reputations scrubbed clean. I was a senior associate there, a job I had held for 5 years, not for the money, but for the access. I walked into the glass-walled lobby wearing a pair of black trousers and a white button-down shirt I had purchased at a discount store 2 blocks away. The fabric was scratchy, the fit was slightly too loose around the shoulders, and the shoes were stiff faux leather that pinched my heels. When I swiped my badge, The receptionist looked up, her eyes widening slightly as she took in my appearance. I was usually draped in silk and cashmere, my hair blown out to perfection. Today, my hair was pulled back into a severe tight bun to hide the fact that it still smelled faintly of smoke. I offered her no explanation, just a sharp nod, and walked past. I reached my office and closed the door. The silence was absolute. I sat down at my desk, the ergonomic chair molding to my spine, and for the first time since the fire, I felt grounded. This was my domain. Here, chaos was just raw data waiting to be organized. My boss, Elias, knocked once before entering. He was a man of few words, a shark in a bespoke suit who could smell weakness from 3 floors away. He stood in the doorway, his eyes scanning me, the cheap shirt, the dark circles under my eyes, the tension in my jaw. He knew about the fire. It had been on the news, mostly because of my mother's live stream. "You are here," Elias stated, not asking a question. "I have the Henderson file to close," I replied, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. "And the senator needs a strategy for the leaked audio by noon." Elias looked at me for a long moment. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not offer empty platitudes about tragedy or resilience. He respected me too much for that. He saw that I was functioning, and in our line of work, functioning was the only metric that mattered. "Take the conference room for the week if you need to sleep somewhere with a lock," Elias said, placing a file on my desk. "And bill the clothes to the expense account as client relation essentials. You look like you are undercover." He turned and left. It was the kindest thing anyone had done for me in years. I worked for 10 hours straight. I buried myself in other people's disasters to avoid looking at my own. But when the sun went down and the office emptied out, the silence returned, heavy and suffocating. I did not go back to the motel immediately. I opened a new document on my secure work laptop. I stared at the blinking cursor, the white page taunting me. I typed 2 words at the top, Project Zero. It was time to balance the books. For 12 years, I had operated under the delusion that I was a member of the Asherton family. I believed that my labor was a contribution to a shared legacy. I believed that love was a transaction. I gave them safety, and they gave me belonging. But the fire had revealed the fraudulent nature of that contract. I had been paying premiums on an insurance policy that did not exist. I began to type. I created a spreadsheet, converting emotional labor into forensic accounting. Item 1, Robert Asherton. 3 years ago, my father needed a bridge loan of $40 million to cover bad bets he had made on cryptocurrency. The banks refused because his liquidity was tied up in shell companies. He needed a co-signer with a clean record. He used my name, but that was not the crime. The crime was the collateral. He had forged my signature on documents that leveraged my own future trust fund money that my grandmother had left specifically for me to secure the loan. When I found out, he laughed and said it was just paperwork. I had spent 6 months unwinding the legal knot, creating a paper trail that legitimized his forgery so he would not be indicted for bank fraud. Item 2. Victoria Asherton, my mother's charity, the Asherton Light Foundation, was a sieve. She used donation money to pay for her vacations, her wardrobe, and her spa treatments. 2 years ago, the IRS flagged a discrepancy of $200,000. I spent 4 weeks rewriting 5 years of tax returns, reclassifying her personal spending as networking expenses and donor cultivation events. I created invoices from non-existent vendors. I built a labyrinth of paperwork so dense that the auditor gave up and settled for a minor fine. I saved her from a federal prison sentence for tax evasion. Item 3. Leo Asherton, my brother, the golden boy. Last year, he drove his Porsche through a storefront in the Lower East Side while high on prescription painkillers. He fled the scene. There were cameras. There were witnesses. I was the one who went to the police precinct. I was the one who located the owner of the store and offered him $50,000 in cash, my own cash, to drop the charges and sign a non-disclosure agreement. I was the one who wiped the security footage from the nearby bodega by bribing the clerk. Leo never spent a second in a holding cell. He never even said thank you. He just complained that I had taken too long to get his car out of impound. I looked at the list. It went on for pages. DUI charges, sexual harassment settlements, illegal dumping of construction waste, insider trading accusations. I realized then that I was not a daughter. I was a chief risk officer who had never been paid a salary. I was a janitor for the soul of a family that had no conscience. Then, I opened the email from the fire investigator. I had requested the preliminary report through a contact at the fire department, bypassing my father. The subject line read, Asherton Penthouse, Cause of Origin. I clicked it open, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I read the technical jargon, the analysis of burn patterns and electrical loads. And then I found the paragraph that turned my blood to ice. The fire had started in the heating unit. Yes. But the report noted that the building's central fire alarm system had been manually disabled on the penthouse floor. The log showed it had been turned off 6 months ago. The reason listed in the building management log, renovation noise complaints. My father had ordered the alarms off because he found the testing beeps annoying when he visited. He had never ordered them back on. Furthermore, the report noted that the sprinkler system in the penthouse had failed because the pipes were dry. The water had been shut off to that specific line to repair a leak in the floor below. A repair that was completed 3 years ago. The valve had never been reopened. The apartment was not a home. It was a tax shelter owned by Asherton Holdings. My father had rented it to me on paper to claim a loss. But he had refused to spend a single dollar on maintenance because the building was slated for demolition in 5 years to make way for a new high-rise. He knew. He knew the wiring was bad. He knew the alarms were off. He knew the sprinklers were dry. He had let me live in a tinderbox because fixing it would have cost him money. And replacing me was free. My phone buzzed on the desk. I looked down. From Victoria Asherton. Subject urgent. Gala photos. Isla, where are you? The press is asking for the high-resolution photos from the gala for the society pages. Also, why is my credit card declined at Saks? Did you forget to transfer the funds again? Fix this immediately. You are being incredibly selfish, disappearing like this. From Robert Asherton, subject meeting with DOJ. I have a meeting with the Department of Justice on Thursday regarding the merger. I need the compliance briefing. Do not make me ask twice. Stop pouting about the apartment. We will find you a studio somewhere eventually. From Leo Asherton, subject, no subject. Yo, I think I got a girl pregnant. Need a plan. Call me. They did not know. They truly did not know that the Isla they wrote to the fixer, the doormat, the safety net had burned to death 2 nights ago. I did not reply. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a small, silver external hard drive. It was the backup I had performed the night of the fire. Just minutes before the heater exploded, I usually wipe the drive every month, adhering to a strict policy of data destruction to protect the family. But in the chaos, I had grabbed it. I plugged it into the laptop. A window popped up, asking for a password. I typed it in Family First. The folder opened. Tens of thousands of files, emails, bank statements, recordings of phone calls, scans of forged documents, the blueprints of every lie, every theft, every moral failure of the Asherton dynasty. I had the metadata. I had the timestamps. I had the digital fingerprints that proved I acted on their orders, under duress, often with them explicitly acknowledging the illegality of their requests. I hovered my mouse over the delete button. That was the instinct. Protect them. Save them. It was a habit etched into my neural pathways. But then I remembered the champagne. I remembered the red dress. I remembered the text, "Good luck, LOL." I moved the mouse away from delete. I dragged the folder into a new encrypted partition on my laptop. I named the partition The Arsenal. I sat back in the ergonomic chair, the cheap fabric of my shirt scratching against my skin. A cold, terrifying calm settled over me. Revenge is usually depicted as a fiery explosion, a screaming match, a gun in the night, but I was not a gangster. I was a strategist. If I attacked them now, while I was weak and they were strong, I would lose. They had lawyers. They had the press. They They had the narrative. No. I would not scream. I would not sue. I would not light a match. I would simply vanish. I was the structural integrity of their lives. I was the one who reminded them to pay their bills, the one who checked their contracts, the one who filtered their public statements, the one who legally laundered their sins. I would let gravity do the work. I would remove myself from the equation and watch as the weight of their own incompetence crushed them. I closed the laptop. I picked up my phone and removed the SIM card. I snapped the small plastic chip in half and dropped it into the trash can next to my desk. Project Zero is live, I whispered to the empty office. I stood up, turned off the lights, and walked out into the cool New York night. I went back to the motel, laid down on the lumpy mattress, and for the first time in 12 years, I slept without setting an alarm. I did not need to wake up early to save anyone. The demolition had begun, and all I had to do was nothing. The art of resignation is usually a loud affair. People write letters. They give 2 weeks of notice. They clear out their desks. And they say goodbye. It is a ritual of separation. But I did not want to separate. I wanted to disappear, to truly dismantle the Asherton Empire. I could not detonate a bomb. I had to slowly remove the lug nuts from the wheels while the car was moving at 100 miles per hour. For the next 3 days, I existed in a state of hyper-focused digital surgery. I did not return to the burnt shell of my penthouse, nor did I answer the 47 missed calls from my mother. I sat in the ergonomic chair at Oberon Strategy, surrounded by the hum of servers and the low murmur of crisis management, and I began the process of the strategic withdrawal. It started with my father, Robert. I logged into the Asherton Holdings central server using my administrator credentials. For a decade, I had set up a complex series of email filters for his primary inbox. My father was a man who believed that reading anything longer than 3 sentences was a waste of his executive time. Therefore, any email containing words like Internal Revenue Service, audit, compliance failure, overdue, or subpoena was automatically diverted from his inbox to mine. I would read them, handle them, pay the fines from a slush fund, and present him with a single sheet of paper to sign at the end of the month. He called it streamlining. I called it adult supervision. I navigated to the settings menu. My cursor hovered over the filter labeled Robert_high-risk_divert. I clicked edit. I did not delete the filter. That would be too obvious. Instead, I changed the destination. Instead of routing these terrifying emails to idla.ashertonoberonstrategy.com, I routed them directly to Robert, ashertonholdings.com. I also set a rule that marked them as read after 5 minutes if they were not opened, so his assistant would not flag them immediately. Then, I went to the calendar application. I found the recurring reminders for his quarterly tax filings, his license renewals, and his debt service payments. I deleted my name from the notification list. I clicked Save Changes. The effect would not be immediate. It would be a slow creep. Tomorrow, or perhaps the day after. An email from the tax authorities regarding a discrepancy in his offshore accounts would land in his inbox. Sandwiched between a golf newsletter and a dinner invitation, he would ignore it, assuming I had seen it. Then another would come, then a final notice. By the time he realized no one was watching the gate, the wolves would already be in the foyer. Next was Victoria. My mother's life was an automated luxury. I accessed the banking portal for the Asherton Light Foundation. The interface was sleek and blue. I navigated to the scheduled payments section. There was a list of 40 recurring payments. Some were legitimate, like the salary for the foundation's director, but many were not. There was the monthly payment of $8,000 to a consulting firm that was actually her personal stylist. There was the $5,000 a month for storage fees that paid for her secret apartment in Soho, where she kept her collection of illegal ivory antiques. I selected all. I moved the mouse to the button that said, Cancel Autopay. A warning box popped up. Are you sure late fees may apply? I whispered. I am counting on it. I clicked yes. Then I moved to her public relations account. My mother received roughly 50 media inquiries a week. Most were intrusive questions about where the donation money actually went. I had set up an AI-driven autoresponder that sent polite, vague, legally vetted non-answers like, "Thank you for your interest. The foundation is currently reviewing its fiscal strategies to maximize impact." I disabled the autoresponder. From this moment on, when a journalist emailed asking why the foundation had spent $50,000 on floral arrangements, they would receive nothing but silence, and silence, in the world of journalism, was an invitation to dig deeper, or worse. My mother, noticing the silence, would decide to answer them herself. Victoria Asherton, without a script, was a PR suicide bomber waiting to detonate. Then came Serena. My sister's career as an influencer was a mathematical lie. She boasted 2 million followers on her main platform, a number that secured her lucrative sponsorship deals with fashion brands and detox tea companies. But she did not know that I paid a reputation management firm in Eastern Europe $15,000 a month to maintain that number. They managed an army of bot accounts that liked, commented, and shared her posts within seconds of upload. They were the seeding team. I opened the invoice for Digital Growth Partners, LLC. It was due in 48 hours. I forwarded the invoice to Serena's personal email with a note attached from a generic admin account. "Please process payment directly." I knew Serena. She never paid bills. She assumed bills were things that happened to other people. She would ignore it, and when she ignored it, the invoice would go unpaid. And when the invoice went unpaid, the bots would stop working. I imagined her face 3 days from now, when she posted a selfie and received only 12 likes instead of her usual 20,000. The algorithm would drop her like a stone. Her engagement rate would plummet. The brands would call, asking why her reach had evaporated overnight. She would spiral, and in her desperation to fix it, she would buy cheap, obvious bots that would get her account banned. It was a beautiful, self-correcting problem. Finally, Leo. This was the most dangerous move. My brother was a walking liability. I logged into the legal database of our family's law firm. My name was listed as the guarantor of record for his current bail bond and 3 ongoing civil settlements. Essentially, if Leo ran or stopped paying, they came for me. I drafted a formal legal notice, utilizing my power of attorney, which ironically my father had forced me to sign years ago so I could handle their mess without bothering him. I formally withdrew my personal assets as collateral for Leo Asherton's legal obligations. I replaced the collateral with the deed to a commercial warehouse in New Jersey that my father had been trying to sell for years. It was a valid asset, but it was illiquid. If Leo messed up now, the bail bondsman would not call me. He would put a lien on my father's property. The snake would bite its own tail. I finished the digital execution at 4 a.m. I felt lightheaded, not from fatigue, but from the sheer lack of weight. For the first time in my adult life, I was not carrying them. The next step was physical extraction. I could not stay at the motel forever, and I certainly could not rent anything under the name Isla Asherton that my father could track. He had friends in real estate. He had friends in banking. I used a shell company I had created years ago for a Project Zero contingency. It was called Veritas Consulting. It had a clean credit history and a modest bank account I had slowly filled with my own bonuses over 5 years. I found an apartment in the financial district, a neighborhood my family despised because it was too commercial and dead after 5 programmes. It was a studio, only 500 square feet, located in a building that was essentially a fortress. It had biometric security, 24-hour doormen who were former military, and no windows facing the street. I paid 6 months of rent up front using a cashier's check. Moving in took exactly 1 hour because I had nothing to move. I bought a mattress, a set of white sheets, a coffee maker, and a secure router. I sat in the middle of the empty room, listening to the silence. It was small. It was sterile. It was perfect. There was no velvet here to catch fire. There were no antiques to protect. There was just me and the hum of the refrigerator. I took my new phone, a burner prepaid model I had bought with cash, and sent a single email to my boss. "Elias, updated contact info, for urgent client matters only. Do not share with external parties. I kept my old work email active on my laptop, but I turned off the notifications. I needed it as a listening post. I needed to see the panic when it started, and it did. It began with small tremors. On Thursday afternoon, I was at my desk at Oberon, reviewing a merger document for a client. When I saw a notification pop up on my old email, it was a forwarded message from my father's assistant, Davis. Subject: help. Amex. Declined, Miss Asherton. So sorry to bother you. Your father is at Le Bernardin with the Japanese investors. His black card was just declined. He is furious. He says it is a chip error. I tried the backup card, and it also didn't work. He is making me pay with my personal card, but my limit is only $5,000. Please advise ASAP. I read the email. I sipped my coffee. I did not reply. Robert Asherton was currently experiencing the reality of his own credit score, which, without my constant infusion of cash transfers and debt restructuring, was actually quite poor. He would have to suffer the indignity of having his assistant pay for dinner. He would rage. He would scream at the bank. The bank would tell him his accounts were flagged for unusual activity because the person who usually verified the activity was not answering the phone. 2 hours later, an email from Serena. Subject: Instagram is broken. Isla, where the hell are you? My engagement is down 90%. Did you change the password? The seating guys aren't answering my DMs. Fix it now. I dragged the email into a folder I had named The Evidence. They thought these were glitches. They thought the universe had just hiccuped. They had no idea that the engine of their lives had been removed, and they were currently coasting on momentum that would run out in exactly 3, 2, 1. Isla? I looked up. Julian, a senior partner at Oberon, was standing at my office door. Julian was sharp, ambitious, and one of the few people who knew exactly how much work I did for my family. He closed the door behind him and sat on the edge of my desk. You look like you are plotting a murder, Julian said, his voice low. Just a reorganization, Julian, I replied, typing away. He looked at me with genuine concern. Word on the street is that Asherton Holdings is in final talks with the Vanguard Group. A massive merger. We are talking $2 billion. If that deal goes through, your father becomes untouchable. I stopped typing. The Vanguard Group, that was the exit strategy my father had been bragging about for years. If he merged with Vanguard, his debts would be absorbed. His sins would be buried under a mountain of corporate compliance, and he would retire with a golden parachute worth hundreds of millions. They are in due diligence right now, Julian warned. Vanguard is going to turn over every rock. If they find anything at all, the deal dies. He leaned in closer. Your father is going around telling people you are on a sabbatical due to emotional distress from the fire. He is trying to get ahead of your absence. He needs the books to look clean for another 4 weeks. Can they survive the audit without you? I looked at Julian. I thought about the emails diverting to my father's inbox. I thought about the unpaid invoices. I thought about the tax returns I was no longer falsifying. I smiled. It was a cold, razor-thin smile that did not reach my eyes. Julian, I said, my voice soft and terrifyingly calm. The Asherton family record is only clean because I have spent 12 years bleaching it. I scrubbed the blood. I scrubbed the money, and I scrubbed the lies. I closed my laptop with a definitive snap. But I have some bad news for the Vanguard Group, I said. We are all out of bleach. Julian stared at me for a second, a shiver of realization passing through him. He stood up and backed away slightly. Remind me never to cross you. Isla, he said. That is good advice, I replied. I watched him leave. I turned my chair to look out the window at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere out there, in the glittering lights, my family was dining, posting, and spending, oblivious to the fact that the floor beneath them had already ceased to exist. They were Wile E. Coyote, having run off the cliff, hanging in midair, just waiting for the moment they looked down, and I was going to be the one to point at the ground. 3 months is a substantial amount of time in the life of a fruit fly, but in the slow-motion collapse of a dynasty, it is barely a blink. However, the cracks were starting to show. They were hairline fractures at first, barely visible to the naked eye, but because I was the structural engineer who had held the building up, I saw every single one of them. It began with my mother, Victoria. For the past decade, my mother's relationship with the press had been a carefully choreographed dance. I was the choreographer, I wrote the scripts, I vetted the interviewers, and I pre-approved the questions if a journalist went off script. I was the one standing behind the camera, signaling for the segment to end, but I was not there anymore. I was sitting in my sterile, windowless office at Oberon Strategy, watching a live feed of the morning exchange on my second monitor while sipping a lukewarm herbal tea. My mother was the guest of honor. She looked radiant in a pastel blue Chanel suit, her hair coiffed into a helmet of blonde perfection. She was there to promote the upcoming spring gala. But the interviewer, a sharp-eyed woman named Diane, had clearly done her homework. "So, Victoria," Diane said, leaning in with a predatory smile. "We were looking at the public filings for the Asherton Light Foundation. Last year, you raised $3 million for inner-city art initiatives, but the records show only $200,000 was actually dispersed to schools. Can you explain where the other $2.8 million went?" I watched my mother's face. It was a masterclass in panic masked by Botox. Usually, this was the moment I would have stepped in or provided her with the administrative overhead speech I had drilled into her brain. But she was alone. She had emailed me 6 times that morning. Subject talking points. Isla, pick up. What is the answer for the overhead question? They sent the list. I do not understand what operating ratio means. Call me now. I had replied 5 minutes before she went on air. My response was short, sweet, and disastrous. Subject retalking points. You are a public figure. Mother, scripts make you look robotic. Just speak from your heart. Tell them the truth about how hard you work. And so, she did, on the screen. Victoria let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. Well, Diane, people do not understand that charity is expensive. You cannot inspire the underprivileged if you look poor. The money went to maintaining the image of the foundation. We had to host dinners. We had to fly in consultants from Milan. We are selling a dream, and dreams are not cheap. The silence in the studio was deafening. Diane blinked, clearly unable to believe her luck. So, you are saying the donation money was used to fund your lifestyle to inspire the poor? Exactly, Victoria beamed, thinking she had nailed it. It is aspirational. I closed the browser tab. The clip would be viral on TikTok within the hour. The hashtag aspirational theft was about to trend. I did not have time to dwell on my mother's immolation because my phone buzzed. It was a collect call from the New York City Central Booking Facility. It was Leo. I let it ring. I watched the phone vibrate on my desk, buzzing like an angry insect. It rang until it went to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. My brother had never spent a night in jail. He treated the roads of Manhattan like his personal Grand Prix circuit. Usually, when he was pulled over, he would drop our father's name, and if that did not work, he would call me. I would arrive with a retainer check for a traffic lawyer and a polite conversation with the precinct captain about youthful indiscretions. But today, he had been caught drag racing his new Ferrari down the West Side Highway at 3 p.m. He had clipped a delivery van. No one was hurt, thankfully, but the police officer was not interested in his last name. I listened to the voicemail later. Isla, pick up the phone. They took my watch. Can you believe that they took my Rolex? The guy in the cell next to me smells like bleach and urine. Get down here with the lawyer. Dad is not answering. Hurry up. I have a date tonight. I deleted the voicemail. Under normal circumstances, I would have been on the phone with the district attorney by now, calling in favors to get the charges reduced to a misdemeanor. Instead, I opened my calendar and scheduled a yoga class for 6 o'clock. Leo would have to stay in custody for the mandatory 48 hours before his arraignment. 2 nights on a metal cot with a thin wool blanket would teach him more about the legal system than I ever could. The next crack appeared in the boardroom. My father, Robert, was not a man of details. He was a big-picture guy. The details were my job. Specifically, the detail of hiding the massive holes in his balance sheet. I received a text from Julian, my ally at Oberon, Julian. Just heard from a contact at the bank. Your dad's meeting with the auditors is going south. They asked about the consulting fees paid to the Shell Corps in the Caymans. He told them those were standard operational costs. They asked for the invoices. He told them to ask Isla. I smiled. The consulting fees were actually payments on his gambling debts. I usually forged the invoices using a template I had created from a defunct marketing firm. But since I had wiped the hard drive of the family computer before I left, the template was gone. Isla. What did they say, Julian? They suspended the credit line pending a full review. He is screaming at his new assistant right now, apparently. He threw a paperweight. I felt a twinge of phantom guilt, a remnant of my old life. But I crushed it instantly. Robert Asherton had thrown me to the wolves the night of the fire. He could handle a few auditors. But the final blow of the week came from Serena. My sister lived for validation. Her oxygen was attention. With her engagement metrics tanking because I had cut off the bot farm, she was desperate. Desperation makes influencers do stupid things. I was sitting in a coffee shop near my new apartment, enjoying a croissant that I had paid for with my own salary, when my phone alerted me to a new post from Serena_style. I opened Instagram. My jaw tightened. The photo showed Serena posing in front of a homeless shelter in the Bowery. She was wearing a $3,000 coat that looked like it was made of distressed rags, part of the new derelict trend from a tone-deaf designer in Paris. She was holding a cup of Starbucks and pouting. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to walk among the shadows to appreciate your own light," sending vibes to the unhoused. We are all the same spirit. Blessed, grateful street style. I closed my eyes. Usually, I monitored her drafts. I would have deleted this photo and burned the phone that took it. I would have explained to her why treating poverty as a fashion accessory was a career-ending move. But I was not there. The comment section was already a bloodbath. User 1. Did you really just use homeless people as a prop for your outfit? Check User 2. The entitlement is actually vomiting-inducing. User 3. Read the room. You spoiled brat. Your family burns down buildings and you mock the poor. Within 2 hours, the brand that sponsored her coat posted a statement distancing themselves from her values. Within 4 hours, her talent agency dropped her. By evening, the family group chat, which I had muted but not left, was exploding. Mom Isla, fix this. Serena is crying hysterically. The internet is being mean to her. Dad, who let her post that Isla? This is your job. You are supposed to watch her. Leo. Can someone bail me out? Hello, is anyone reading this? I am hungry. Serena Isla. I hate you. Why didn't you tell me it was offensive? You ruined my life. I sat in the coffee shop, watching the rain slide down the glass window. I scrolled through the messages. They called me irresponsible. They called me lazy. They called me selfish. Not once did they ask where I was living. Not once did they ask if I had eaten. Not once did they ask if I was healing from the trauma of losing everything I owned. They were not angry that I was gone. They were angry that the appliances had stopped working. To them, I was not a person. I was a toaster that refused to toast. I took a sip of my coffee. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was lightness. It was the feeling of watching a storm rage on a screen while sitting in a warm, dry room. My phone rang again. It was Elias, my boss. I cleared my throat and answered. Hello, Elias? Isla. His voice was gravelly and direct. I need you in my office tomorrow morning at 8. We have a situation. Is the Henderson deal falling apart? I asked, my mind immediately jumping to work mode. No, Henderson is fine. This is about you, or rather, your future. I arrived at Oberon the next morning. Elias was standing by the window. looking out at the skyline. He turned when I entered. "Sit down," he said. I sat. "We have landed the Tokyo contract," Elias said. "It is a massive restructuring of a tech conglomerate. It will require a team on the ground for 2 years. I want you to lead it." My heart leaped. Tokyo, a 2-year assignment. It was the promotion I had been working toward for 5 years. It meant a significant raise, equity in the firm, and most importantly, 7,000 miles of distance between me and New York. "But," Elias continued, raising a hand, "the client is conservative. They value discretion above all else. I have seen the news. Isla, your mother's interview, your sister's scandal, your brother's arrest record. It is a circus." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "I cannot send a circus to Tokyo. If you want this job, you need to be clean. No late-night phone calls from jail. No bailing out parents from tax fraud. You need to cut the cord. Completely." I looked at him. He was offering me a lifeline. He was offering me an escape route that led to a future where I was defined by my talent, not my last name. "I understand," I said. "Do you?" Elias challenged. "You have spent your whole life being their crutch. Are you ready to let them fall?" I thought about the fire. I thought about the laughter on the balcony. I thought about the spreadsheet named Project Zero. "Elias," I said, standing up, "they are not just going to fall. They are going to shatter, and I'm going to sweep up the pieces and throw them in the trash." I went back to my desk. I opened a fresh document. I did not write a letter to my parents. I wrote a legal notice. I utilized the format of a formal cease and desist combined with a termination of contract to Robert Asherton, Victoria Asherton, Leo Asherton, Serena Asherton, from Isla Asherton, date February 15th, RE, termination of all advisory and management services. Notice is hereby given that effective immediately, the undersigned, Isla Asherton, formally terminates all voluntary, unpaid, and informal consultation services previously provided to the Asherton family and Asherton Holdings. This includes, but is not limited to 1. Crisis management and public relations strategy. 2. Personal financial auditing and tax preparation. 3. Legal liaison services for criminal and civil litigation. 4. Reputation management and social media moderation. Any further requests for these services will be billed at my standard professional rate of $1,500 per hour, with a minimum retainer of $50,000 paid in advance. Furthermore, be advised that I have vacated the premises at penthouse address and hold no liability for the maintenance or insurance of said property, retroactive to the date of the fire. Govern yourselves accordingly. I read it over. It was cold. It was professional. It was the only language they respected, the language of liability. I hit send. I leaned back in my chair and watched the second hand on the clock tick. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. My phone exploded. First came the texts. "Dad, is this a joke? You are billing me for being my daughter, Mom Isla. This is cruel. How can you talk about money when the family is under attack? We need you, Serena. $1,500 an hour. You are insane. You are just jealous because I am famous. Leo." "Does this mean you are not coming to court tomorrow?" They did not believe it. They thought it was a negotiation tactic. They thought I was holding out for a bigger allowance or an apology. They could not conceive of a world where I simply did not want to be their servant anymore. I typed one final reply to the group chat. "Isla, please direct all future correspondence to my billing department. If you do not have a retainer on file, your messages will not be read." Then, I blocked them on my personal number. I looked at the arsenal partition on my laptop. The evidence was still there, waiting. I was not ready to use it yet. Let them struggle with the small things first. Let them feel the weight of their own incompetence. I packed my bag. I had a flight to catch in 3 weeks for the preliminary meetings in Tokyo. But before I left, there was one more thing I had to do. My father was hosting his birthday party next week. He would expect me to crawl back. Begging for forgiveness, I decided I would go, But I would not be crawling. I would be walking in to watch the show. After all, I had front-row tickets to the end of the world. It had been 6 months since I walked out of the smoking ruins of my life, and the Asherton Empire was beginning to look less like a fortress and more like a sinking cruise ship where the band was playing louder to drown out the sound of rushing water. The first major hull breach occurred in the non-profit sector, the Asherton Light Foundation. My mother's pride and joy and her personal piggy bank was officially under investigation by the state attorney general. For a decade, I had filed the annual audit reports. I had categorized her spa treatments as wellness retreats for staff and her designer handbag purchases as auction procurement costs. It was illegal, but it was paperwork, and I was a wizard at paperwork. But this year, no one filed the paperwork. When the notification of the audit arrived, Victoria did what she always did. She looked for a scapegoat. She went on national television again, her eyes wide and wet with practiced tears, and claimed that she had been misled by a disgruntled former employee who had failed to maintain the books. She did not name me, but the implication was as subtle as a brick through a window. She told the investigators that I had acted alone, moving money without her knowledge. Unfortunately for Victoria, she had forgotten about the digital paper trail. I still had the emails, hundreds of them, emails where she explicitly directed me to move the funds from the orphan initiative to the renovation account for the Hamptons house. Emails where she asked, "Can we write off the trip to Bora Bora if we take one photo with a local charity?" I did not release these emails to the press. I simply forwarded them, without comment, to the investigators' secure tip line. I was not being vindictive. I was simply complying with a civic duty. Then came the invitation. It arrived by courier. A heavy cream envelope with gold leaf lettering. It was for my father's 60th birthday party. Robert Asherton was turning 60, and despite the rumors of liquidity problems, he was throwing a gala at the St. Regis that was rumored to cost $500,000. The card read, "To my daughter Isla. Family is forgiveness. Please come home." I knew what this was. It was not an olive branch. It was a summons. He did not want me there to cut the cake. He wanted me there because the banks were circling, and he needed a co-signer for a distress loan. He needed the one person with a clean credit history and a legitimate income to vouch for him. He needed me to sign a document stating that the loan he had taken out in my name 5 years ago was valid, so he could refinance it. I decided to go. I spent $2,000 on a dress. It was a sleek, architectural piece in midnight blue, sharp enough to cut glass. I hired a professional makeup artist. I wanted to look like the CEO of my own life, not the tired, soot-stained victim they remembered. When I walked into the ballroom at the St. Regis, the air was thick enough to chew. The room was filled with New York's elite hedge fund managers, politicians, socialites, but the energy was wrong. People were not mingling freely. They were huddled in tight circles, whispering. They knew the foundation was being audited. They knew the stock price of Asherton Holdings had dipped 10% last quarter. They were here to watch the crash, not to celebrate the driver. My father was standing by the ice sculpture, holding a glass of scotch. He looked thinner. The stress was eating him from the inside out. When he saw me, his eyes lit up, not with love, but with relief. He saw an asset walking through the door. "Isla," he boomed, his voice too loud. Trying to project the image of a happy patriarch, he rushed over and grabbed me in a hug that felt more like a shackle. "I knew you would come. I told your mother. Isla is an Asherton. She knows where her loyalty lies." He steered me toward a quiet corner, away from the cameras. "You look expensive," he muttered, his smile dropping instantly. "I assume you billed that dress to the company card I had to reactivate it. I paid for it myself." "Robert," I said coolly, removing his hand from my arm. "I have a job, a real one," he scoffed. "Oberon's strategy. Please, you are a glorified secretary there. Listen, I have some papers in the suite upstairs. Just a formality. The bank needs a signature to clear up that misunderstanding about the trust fund loan. You sign it, we refinance, And I will even give you a cut. $10,000, cash. I looked at him. He was offering me $10,000 to take on $10 million of debt liability. No, I said. His face turned a shade of purple that clashed with his tie. Excuse me. I said no. I am not signing anything. I am just here for the cake. I turned to walk away. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was painful. You ungrateful little brat, he hissed. I gave you everything. I gave you a penthouse. You gave me a fire trap, I whispered back, leaning in close, and you laughed while it burned. He let go of me as if I had burned him. He smoothed his jacket, composing himself as a photographer approached. He flashed a smile that was terrifying in its falseness. Ladies and gentlemen, he shouted, tapping his glass with a spoon. The room went silent. I just want to say how happy I am that my daughter Isla has joined us tonight. We have had a difficult year, as many of you know. Isla had a terrible accident. She lost her apartment in a fire. He paused for effect, looking at me with a gaze full of malice. It is a tragedy, he continued, his voice dripping with condescension. But it is also a lesson. Isla has always been a bit careless with her assets. She forgot to maintain the heating system. It is a shame when young people do not respect the value of property. But we forgive her. That is what families do. We forgive the incompetence. The crowd chuckled nervously. It was a public humiliation. He was painting me as a negligent child, discrediting my professional reputation in front of the most powerful people in the city, to ensure no one would believe me if I spoke out against him. The old Isla would have shrunk away. The old Isla would have cried in the bathroom. I walked to the microphone stand. My father looked surprised, but he could not stop me without making a scene. I took the microphone. I smiled. It was the smile of a predator who has just cornered its prey. Thank you, Father, I said, my voice clear and steady. It is true. Fire is a terrible thing. It destroys everything. But you know what I learned from the investigation? I scanned the room, making eye contact with the bankers and the investors. I learned that sometimes fires are not accidents, I said, my tone conversational, light. Sometimes buildings burn down because the alarms were turned off, and usually when a property that is losing money suddenly catches fire, the only person who benefits is the one holding the insurance policy. It is funny how that works, isn't it? Some people build legacies, others just burn the evidence. The silence that followed was absolute. I handed the microphone back to my father. He looked like he was having a stroke. I had just publicly implied he had committed insurance fraud and arson. I had not said it outright. I was too smart for a defamation suit, but I had planted the seed. And in this room, a seed of doubt was all it took to kill a deal. I walked off the stage. As I made my way through the stunned crowd, a man stepped into my path. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than my car. I recognized him immediately. Marcus Sterling. He was my father's biggest competitor in the real estate market, a shark who had been trying to acquire Asherton Holdings for years. Miss Asherton, he said, his voice low and smooth. That was quite a performance. I prefer transparency to performance. Mr. Sterling, I replied. He handed me a business card. I imagine you have quite a bit of transparency stored on your laptop. Hard drives, perhaps emails. My firm is looking to acquire certain distressed assets. Information is an asset. I would pay 7 figures for a look at the real books of Asherton Holdings. It was a tempting offer. $1 million to hand over the Arsenal Drive and bury my father for good. It would be the easiest money I ever made. But I looked at Marcus Sterling, and I shook my head. I am a crisis manager. Mr. Sterling, I said. I am not a corporate spy, and I am not a traitor. If my father falls, it will be because of his own weight, not because I pushed him. You are protecting him, Sterling asked. Amused. No, I said. I am protecting me. I don't sell my family. I just don't save them anymore. I walked past him. Integrity was the only currency I had left. And I was not going to devalue it. I made my way toward the exit. I had made my point, but the night was not over. My brother, Leo, was near the bar. He was visibly drunk. His face was flushed, his tie was crooked, and he was shouting at a waiter. "Do you know who I am?" Leo screamed, his voice slurring. "I am Leo Asherton. I want the blue label." "Don't tell me you are out." The waiter, a young man who looked terrified, tried to apologize. "Sir," the bar manager said. "I don't care what the manager said," Leo roared. He swung his arm. It happened in slow motion. The heavy crystal glass in Leo's hand connected with the side of the waiter's head. There was a sickening crack. The waiter crumpled to the floor, blood immediately pooling on the white marble. The room erupted. Screams, gasps, people scrambling back. My 12-year-old instinct screamed at me to run to him, get the manager, pay off the waiter, get Leo out the back door, call the fixers. My feet twitched. But then I saw my mother rushing toward him. She was not checking on the bleeding waiter. She was grabbing Leo, wiping the scotch off his jacket, hissing, "Fix your hair. Someone get him out of here." I stopped. I stood by a velvet pillar, 10 feet away, and I did absolutely nothing. I watched as the hotel security pinned Leo to the ground. I watched as he thrashed and screamed obscenities. I watched as the guests pulled out their phones. 100 glowing screens rose in the air, recording the downfall of the Asherton heir in 4K resolution. I saw Serena standing nearby, frozen. She looked at me. Her eyes were pleading. "Do something. You always do something." I looked back at her, and I took a sip of my sparkling water. The police arrived in 6 minutes. They did not care about his last name. They cared about the unconscious man on the floor. They cuffed Leo. They dragged him out through the lobby, past the horrified guests, past the birthday cake that cost $5,000. As they hauled him past me, Leo saw me. "Isla," he screamed, desperation breaking his voice. "Call the lawyer, Isla." I did not move. I watched him disappear into the back of a squad car, the blue and red lights flashing against the glass facade of the hotel. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a market alert. Asherton Holdings. H. After hours. Trading down 15%. The video of the assault was already on Twitter. The caption read, "Asherton Air Assaults Worker. CEO investigated for fraud. Empire crumbling." I walked out of the hotel. The cool night air hit my face. My father was inside, trying to explain to a room full of sharks why his son was a criminal and his daughter was a liability. My mother was sobbing. Not for her son, but for her reputation. I hailed a taxi. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Financial district," I said. "And take the long way. I want to enjoy the view." The image had not just crumbled, it had been pulverized, and all I had to do was wear a nice dress and tell the truth. Bankruptcy is rarely a sudden explosion. It is a slow, suffocating constriction, like a python wrapping itself around a ribcage. It starts with the paper white envelopes arriving by certified mail, stacking up on the mahogany console table in the foyer, unopened and ignored. Then comes the silence of the telephone, as friends stop calling and creditors start dialing. And finally, there is the noise, the sharp rap of the process server's knuckles on the front door, echoing through a house that is too big for the people hiding inside it, for the Asherton family. The suffocation began with the real estate portfolio. My father, Robert, owned 5 properties across the state, or rather, the bank owned them, and Robert merely paid the interest on the loans. For 10 years, the mortgages on the Aspen Ski Lodge and the Hamptons Beach House had been structured as interest-only balloon payments. Every 2 years, the principal would come due, and every 2 years, I would file a hardship extension request, combined with a forged asset liquidity statement. I would mimic my father's signature, a sharp, aggressive scrawl, and the bank would grant another 24 months of grace. But the grace period for the Aspen Lodge expired on March 1st. The bank sent the renewal paperwork in February. It sat in my father's diverted inbox. The the one I used to manage but had rerouted back to him in part 3. He never opened it. The deadline passed. The automated system at the bank flagged the account as non-performing on a Tuesday morning. A team of sheriff's deputies arrived at the Aspen Lodge to change the locks. I read about it in a real estate trade journal while eating a bagel at my desk. The headline was Dry and Brutal, Luxury Foreclosures Spike in Colorado. Asherton Estate seized. My father called the bank, screaming about a clerical error. He told them his daughter handled the paperwork, the bank manager, a man who had tolerated Robert's arrogance only because the paperwork was always perfect. Checked the file. He saw no paperwork. He saw no extension. He saw a default. The foreclosure triggered a cross-default clause in his other loans, because he had lost the Aspen house. The loans for the Hamptons house and the commercial warehouse in Queens were immediately called in. The banks demanded full repayment of the principal within 30 days. The total was $12 million. Robert Asherton did not have $12 million. He did not even have $12,000 of liquid cash. While the banks were dismantling the physical perimeter of the family empire, the social perimeter was being breached by my sister, Serena. The homeless chic scandal had been a PR disaster, but Leo's arrest at the birthday party was the nail in the coffin. Brands are terrified of criminal association. Within 48 hours of the video of Leo punching the waiter going viral, Serena lost her contract with a major athletic wear company. Then the makeup line dropped her. Then the vitamin water sponsorship evaporated. She was losing roughly $50,000 a month in revenue. For a girl whose entire identity was built on consumption, this was a death sentence. She came to find me. I was in a meeting with the Tokyo team, discussing the cultural nuances of corporate apologies, when the receptionist at Oberon Strategy messaged me, "Reception, Miss Asherton. There is a woman here claiming to be your sister. She is agitated. She is demanding to see you." I looked at the message. I felt a cold knot in my stomach, but I did not let it show on my face. I excused myself and walked out to the lobby. Serena was standing by the front desk. She looked unhinged. She was wearing sunglasses indoors, likely to hide swollen eyes, and her hands were shaking. When she saw me, she did not hug me. She launched into a tirade. "You have to fix it," she screamed, her voice cracking. The other people in the lobby, clients, lawyers, consultants, stopped and stared. They canceled the Sephora deal. Isla. "Do you know how much that is worth?" "You have to write a statement. You have to call them and tell them I was, hacked. Tell them I was hacked." I stood 6 feet away from her. My arms crossed. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She was 24 years old, but she was behaving like a toddler who had dropped her ice cream. She took no responsibility for the insensitive photo. She took no responsibility for her brother's violence. She just wanted the magic eraser. "I cannot help you, Serena," I said, my voice low and calm. "You have to," she shrieked, stomping her foot. "You are my sister. You are supposed to clean this up. That is what you do. You are the janitor." The word hung in the air. Janitor. It was the truth. That was how they saw me. Not as a savior, but as the help, the person who scrubbed the toilets of their morality. I turned to the security guard, a large man named Mike, who was standing by the elevators. "Mike," I said, "I do not know this woman. She is causing a disturbance. Please remove her." Serena's mouth fell open. She pulled down her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were red and rimmed with panicked tears. "Isla, are you kidding? It is me. It is Serena." "I have no sister," I said, looking through her as if she were made of glass. "My sister died in a fire 6 months ago." Mike stepped forward. "Miss, you need to leave." "You are a monster," Serena screamed as Mike took her by the elbow. She flailed, knocking over a vase of lilies on the reception desk. The ceramic shattered, water and flowers spilling across the marble floor. "I hope you die alone, Isla. I hope you rot." I watched them drag her out the revolving doors. Then, I looked at the receptionist. "I apologize for the noise," I said. Please bill the cost of the vase to my personal account. I went back to my meeting. I did not shake. I did not cry. I felt lighter. But the assaults were not over. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother. I had blocked her cell phone, but she was calling from a landline. I recognized the number. It was the home office. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity and a need to document their unraveling made me answer. Isla. Her voice was a whisper, trembling with a terror I had never heard before. The IRS agents, they were here. They left a summons. They want to interview me under oath next Tuesday, about the foundation. That sounds serious, I said, typing notes into my arsenal file. Serious. They are talking about prison. Isla tax fraud embezzlement. She started to sob, a jagged, ugly sound. You have to come back. You have to explain to them that it was just mistakes. You know how to talk to them. You speak their language. I cannot do that. Mother, I said. Perjury is a crime. If I lie to federal agents, I go to prison too. But you are my daughter, she wailed. I gave birth to you. I carried you for 9 months. I went through labor for you. How can you be so cold? Does that mean nothing to you? I stopped typing. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. There it was, the ultimate trump card, the biological debt. You gave me life, yes, I said, my voice steady. And for 32 years, I have paid for that life. I raised your other children. I kept your husband out of jail. I kept your name in the papers. I laundered your money and I polished your lies. I calculated the hours. Mother, at my current billing rate, the value of the services I provided to this family exceeds $20 million. I paused. I have paid back the debt of my birth with interest, I said. We are even. I hung up. The emotional violence was exhausting, but the physical danger was just beginning. My father, desperate and cornered by the banks, made a fatal error. He turned to the gray market. He reached out to a private lender named Vargas, a man who operated out of a warehouse in the Bronx and did not require credit checks. Only collateral. Robert tried to borrow $500,000 to pay the retainer for a high-profile criminal defense attorney for Leo, but Vargas required a guarantor. Robert, in his arrogance, assumed he could still use me. He provided Vargas with my social security number and my old address. He forged my signature on the promissory note. However, back in Part 3, I had placed a credit freeze and a fraud alert on all my files with the 3 major credit bureaus. At 4 o'clock on Friday, my phone buzzed with an alert from Experian. Alert hard inquiry blocked. Lender Vargas Holdings, LLC. Reason frozen file. I stared at the screen. My father had just tried to sell my future to a loan shark. I did not call my father. I called the number listed on the inquiry alert. A man with a gravelly voice answered. This is the fraud department, I lied, my voice crisp. We are alerting you that the application submitted by Robert Asherton containing the personal data of Isla Asherton is fraudulent. The subject does not consent to this loan. Proceed at your own risk. The man on the other end hung up immediately. 2 hours later, the police scanner, which I now monitored via an app, reported a disturbance at the Asherton townhouse on the Upper East Side. 2 men had tried to force their way past the doorman. They were shouting about a breach of contract. They were looking for Robert. The bubble was gone. The invisible shield of wealth that had protected my parents from the consequences of their actions had shattered. The wolves were not just at the door. They were in the hallway. I watched it all from my small, secure apartment. I read the gossip blogs. Asherton family implodes, foreclosures, arrests, creditors banging on doors. The family turned on each other with the ferocity of starving rats. I saw the leaked text messages, sold to the tabloids by a former maid who had not been paid in 3 months. Victoria to Robert, this is your fault. You gambled away the liquidity. You are useless, Robert, to Victoria. If you hadn't spent a fortune on that ridiculous charity, we would have reserves. Leo to Serena, you ruined my defense. The jury hates us because of your homeless photo. Serena to Leo. You are a violent junkie. I hope you rot in jail. They were tearing each other apart. Without me there to absorb the toxicity, they had no one to abuse but each other. But the final piece of the puzzle, the one that turned this tragedy into a catastrophe, landed on my desk late Friday night. I had been running a background check on Asherton Holdings' employee benefits packages as part of my due diligence for the Arsenal. I noticed a discrepancy in the pension fund. The Asherton Holdings Employee Retirement Trust was supposed to hold $15 million. It was the life savings of 300 employees' secretaries, janitors, middle managers, people who had worked for my father for 30 years. I accessed the ledger. The balance was zero. My father had drained it. Over the last 18 months, as his crypto bets failed and his lifestyle costs soared, he had systematically siphoned off the pension money. He had moved it through a series of shell companies in Panama and the Cayman Islands. He had stolen the retirement of 300 innocent people to buy Italian suits and throw parties. I felt a wave of nausea. I knew my father was greedy. I knew he was unethical. But this was evil. I looked at the screen. Because I had been the one to set up the original shell companies years ago under the guise of tax optimization. I knew the routing numbers. I knew the passcodes. I realized with a jolt that I was the only person on earth who could access those accounts. I could log in, reverse the transfers, and return the money to the pension fund before anyone noticed. I could save the employees. But if I did that, I would also be saving my father. If the money was returned, the crime would be erased. He would claim it was a glitch. I sat in the dark, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. If I did nothing, 300 families would lose everything. If I acted, my father would walk free. I made a decision. I would not return the money. That would cover his tracks. Instead, I would secure the money. I logged into the offshore system. I moved the $15 million from my father's hidden account into a secure escrow account under the jurisdiction of the Department of Justice, flagged as evidence in pending investigation. I did not steal it. I froze it. I effectively locked the vault and threw the key to the FBI. My father would wake up tomorrow morning to find his secret slush fund empty. He would try to access the money to pay off the loan sharks or the lawyers, and he would find a message account seized by federal authorities. The financial crisis was no longer just about debt. It was about to become a federal indictment. I closed the laptop. The silence in my apartment was heavy, but it was clean. I was not the janitor anymore. I was the executioner. There is a specific kind of silence that exists in high-security buildings. It is a vacuum-sealed, expensive silence, designed to keep the chaos of New York City at bay. My apartment in the financial district was a fortress of this silence. I had chosen it for its biometric locks, its 24-hour armed concierge, and the assurance that no one could get to my floor without a key fob that I alone possessed. But I had underestimated the one thing that can bypass any security system: desperate money. It was 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I was sitting on my beige sofa, reading a treatise on corporate restructuring, when the buzzer rang. Not the lobby buzzer, the door buzzer. I froze. No one knew where I lived except the leasing office and the FBI agents I was secretly communicating with regarding the pension fund. I walked to the door and checked the monitor. The camera feed was distorted by the fisheye lens, but the figures were unmistakable. Robert and Victoria Asherton. They were not wearing their usual armor of bespoke wool and silk. My father was wearing a wrinkled raincoat over a stained shirt. My mother was wearing dark glasses indoors. Her hair pulled back in a frantic, loose knot. They looked like fugitives. I did not open the door. I pressed the intercom button. "Go away," I said, my voice flat. "Isla, please." My mother's voice came through the speaker, tinny and broken. "We have nowhere else to go. The press is outside the townhouse. The marshals are seizing the cars. Please, just 5 minutes." "I am calling security," I said. "Wait." It was my father. His voice was not the booming baritone of the boardroom. It was a rasp. I know about the pension fund. Isla, I know you have the keys. If you don't open this door, I am going to the federal building tomorrow morning and telling them you stole it. I will tell them you were the one who set up the shell companies. I will drag you down with me." I paused. My hand hovered over the call security button. He was bluffing. Of course, he knew he had stolen it, but he also knew that I was the architect of the system he had used, if he muddied the waters enough. An investigation could drag on for years, ruining my career at Oberon Strategy and costing me the Tokyo assignment. He wanted a negotiation. I unlocked the door. They spilled into the apartment like oil leaking from a tanker. They brought the smell of rain and fear with them. My mother looked around the small, 500-square-foot studio with a mixture of confusion and disdain, as if she could not believe her daughter lived in a single room. "Is this it?" she whispered, clutching her handbag to her chest. "It is paid for," I replied, closing the door and locking the deadbolt. I did not offer them a seat. I stood in the center of the room, my arms crossed. "You have 5 minutes. Talk." Robert did not waste time on pleasantries. He fell to his knees. It was a shocking sight. Robert Asherton, a man who had never apologized to anyone in his life, a man who treated waiters like furniture, was on his knees on my hardwood floor. He grabbed my hand. His palms were sweaty and cold. "Isla, you have to save us." He wept. He was actually crying, ugly, gasping sobs. "They are going to indict me. The DOJ sent a target letter. They know about the Employee Retirement Trust. They know the money is gone." "I know," I said, pulling my hand away. "I read the subpoena." "I didn't mean to take it," he pleaded, looking up at me with bloodshot eyes. "I just borrowed it. I was going to pay it back when the merger went through. It was a bridge loan." "It was theft." "Robert," I corrected him, "you stole $15 million from janitors and secretaries." "I can fix it," he insisted, scrambling to his feet. "But the accounts are frozen. I tried to access the Cayman portal this morning to move some funds around, but I got locked out. You changed the codes, didn't you? You are the only one who knows the backdoor encryption." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Isla, listen to me. I need you to log in. Just log in and transfer the money back to the main account, if the money is there when the auditors look on Monday. There is no crime. It's just an accounting error. We all walk away clean. You save the family. You save the name." My mother stepped forward, grabbing my arm. Her grip was desperate. "Isla, baby, think about your brother. If your father goes to prison, Leo has no one. Serena has no one. Do it for them. Just type in the code. That is all we need. Just type in the code." I looked at them. They were pathetic. They were terrified, but I was also a professional risk analyst. And something about this scene was wrong. My father was desperate. Yes, but his eyes were darting around the room, checking the corners, and his right hand was stuffed deep into the pocket of his raincoat. He was keeping that side of his body turned slightly toward me. I realized what was happening. He was recording me. If I logged in, if I even admitted that I could log in and move that money, I would be touching the stolen funds. I would be activating the digital trail. And with a recording of me agreeing to fix it, he could spin a narrative that I had stolen the money and he had only just discovered it and forced me to return it. He would use me as the fall guy. He would trade my freedom for his immunity. It was a trap, a clumsy, desperate trap set by a man who had run out of options. I felt a surge of cold rage. Even now, on his knees, begging for his life. He was trying to kill me. "Okay," I said softly. Robert stopped crying instantly. "Okay. I can do it," I lied. "I have the admin keys. I can reverse the wire transfers. The money can be back in the U.S. account in 10 minutes. The relief on their faces was grotesque. My mother let out a sob of joy. Robert let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a year. "Thank you," he said, pulling a laptop out of his bag. "Do it. Do it now." "Wait," I said, holding up a hand. "I need one thing first." "Anything," Robert said. I will give you the deed to the townhouse. I will give you the cars. I don't want your debt. Robert, I said. I want insurance. I walked over to my desk. I opened my laptop and typed furiously for 2 minutes. They watched me, impatient, shifting from foot to foot. What are you doing? Victoria asked, her voice shrill. The auditors could be logging in any minute. I am drafting a statement, I said. If I am going to touch that radioactive money, I need proof that I am doing it under your instructions to correct your error. I need a confession. Robert stiffened. I am not signing a confession. Then I am not logging in, I said, closing my laptop. And you can explain to the FBI why the pension fund is empty. I stared at him. It was a game of chicken. He had a recording device in his pocket, but a recording was useless if I did not commit the crime. He needed me to move the money. He looked at Victoria. She nodded frantically. She didn't care about legal strategy. She just wanted the immediate problem solved. Fine, Robert spat. Write it, but keep it vague. No, I said. Detailed. I printed the document on my wireless printer. It whirred to life. Spitting out a single sheet of paper, I picked it up and read it aloud. I, Robert Asherton, hereby confess that I acted alone in the embezzlement of $15 million from the Asherton Employee Retirement Trust. I acknowledge that my daughter, Isla Asherton, had no prior knowledge of this theft. I am solely responsible for the illicit transfers to the Cayman accounts. Any subsequent actions taken by Isla Asherton are performed solely at my request to restitute the stolen funds. It was a death warrant for his freedom, but in his mind, it was a private document. He thought that once the money was returned and the investigation dropped, he could just destroy the paper, or more likely, he planned to wrestle it from me the moment the transfer was complete. He grabbed the pen, he signed it, a jagged, angry signature. Victoria signed as a witness. I took the paper, I checked the signatures, they were valid. I folded the document and slid it into the breast pocket of my blazer. I buttoned the blazer. Okay, Robert said, pushing his open laptop toward me. It is signed. Now move the money. I looked at the laptop. Then I looked at Robert. No, I said. The room went silent. The air conditioner hummed. What did you say? Robert whispered. I said no. I repeated, my voice calm and clear. I am not moving the money. The money is already secured. I moved it 3 days ago into a DOJ escrow account. It is safe. You, however, are not. Robert's face went pale, then red. You tricked me. You are wearing a wire. Robert, I said, pointing to his pocket. Turn it off. He froze. His hand went to his pocket instinctively. You came here to frame me, I said, stepping back toward the desk where my phone lay. You wanted me to touch the funds so you could claim I was the embezzler. You wanted to trade my life for yours. Again. I patted the pocket where the confession lay. But now I have this, I said. This isn't insurance for the transaction. This is a ticket. My ticket out of your mess. And your ticket to prison. Robert let out a roar. It was not a human sound. It was the sound of a wounded animal. Give me that paper, he screamed. He lunged at me. He was 60 years old, but panic gave him strength. He cleared the distance between us in 2 steps. He grabbed the lapels of my blazer, trying to rip it open to get to the pocket. His spit hit my face. He smelled of scotch and stale sweat. You ungrateful bitch, he shouted, shaking me. Give it to me. My mother was screaming in the background. Get it, Robert, get it. I did not fight him. I did not try to hit him. I simply let him grab me, because I knew something he didn't. I had pressed the silent panic button on my keychain the moment I saw them on the camera monitor. The door to my apartment exploded inward. It wasn't the police. It was the building's private security team, 2 massive men in tactical gear who were paid very well to ensure residents were not assaulted in their homes. Step back, the lead guard shouted. Leveling a taser, Robert released me, stumbling back, his hands in the air. He looked from the guards to me, his chest heaving. I smoothed my blazer. I I checked the pocket. The paper was still there. "These people are trespassing," I said to the guards, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "They assaulted me. I want them removed from the premises immediately." "Isla," my mother shrieked, falling to her knees again. "Don't do this. He is your father." I looked down at her. "He is not my father. He is a thief who just tried to frame me for a federal crime." I turned to Robert. He was staring at me with pure hatred. The mask was gone. There was no family left. There were just two enemies in a room. "You are going to regret this," he hissed. "I will destroy you. I will tell them you planned it all." I pulled the folded paper halfway out of my pocket, just enough for him to see his own signature. "You already told them the truth, Robert," I said, "and I am going to mail this to the U.S. Attorney in the morning." The guards grabbed them. They did not go quietly. My mother was wailing, a high, keening sound that echoed in the hallway. My father was cursing, shouting threats that bounced harmlessly off the soundproof walls. I watched them being dragged down the hallway toward the elevator. The doors slid shut, cutting off the noise. Silence returned to the fortress. I locked the door. I engaged the deadbolt. I put the chain on. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. 50 stories below. I was shaking. My adrenaline was crashing, leaving me cold and trembling. I sank onto the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I took the paper out of my pocket. I read it again. "I, Robert Asherton, hereby confess. It was over. I had the smoking gun. I had the leverage. But as I sat there in the empty, expensive dark, I realized I had lost something too. I had lost the last tiny, foolish hope that they might actually love me. They had come here not to save me, but to sacrifice me." I stood up. I walked to my safe, punched in the code, and placed the confession inside. I locked it. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady again. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "If you want a war, I will give you a war." I picked up my phone. I dialed the number for the FBI agent I had been speaking with for weeks. "Agent Miller," I said when he answered. "This is Isla Asherton. I have a document I think you need to see, and I would like to discuss the terms of my immunity." The offer of the devil had been made, and I had declined. Now, it was time to send the devil back to hell. The war did not start with a bang. He even provided a fake invoice from a rehab clinic in Switzerland, a document so clearly forged that the font did not even match. But the public did not care about fonts. They cared about the scandal. "We love Isla," my mother was quoted as saying, playing the role of the heartbroken matriarch to perfection. "We just want her to get help. She is confused. She thinks we are her enemies. Please, if anyone sees her, tell her to come home." It was a masterstroke of gaslighting. By painting me as insane, they immunized themselves against anything I released. If I showed the world the stolen pension records, they would say, "Look, it is just another fabrication from our sick daughter," public opinion, which acts like a pendulum in a hurricane, swung violently. Half the internet called for my head, labeling me an ungrateful, spoiled brat who bit the hand that fed her. The other half, the internet sleuths who had noticed the discrepancies in the Asherton accounts, were not so sure. But the court of public opinion was not the one that hurt me. It was the boardroom. At 9 o'clock, I arrived at Oberon Strategy. My keycard did not work. The little light on the scanner turned red. A heavy, sickening feeling settled in my stomach. Security opened the door for me, but they did not let me go to my office. They escorted me to a conference room on the first floor. Elias was there. He was not sitting. He was standing by the window, looking older than I had ever seen him. "Isla," he said, not turning around. "You know I cannot have this here." "It is a lie. Elias," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "You know me. You know I'm not unstable. You know I did not steal that money." "I know," Elias said, turning to face me. "But our clients do not know. And right now, Asherton Holdings is radioactively toxic. We have investors calling, asking if the woman handling their mergers is currently being investigated for arson and corporate theft. He slid a white envelope across the table. Administrative leave, he said. Indefinite, pending the outcome of the federal investigation. You are suspending me, I asked. The words tasted like ash. I secured the Tokyo deal. I built this department. And you will have it back when your name is clear, Elias said. But until then, you are a liability. I am sorry. I took the envelope. I did not argue. In the corporate world, perception is reality. And right now, my perception was broken. I walked out of the building carrying a cardboard box with my personal items, a stapler, a mug, and a framed photo of a dog I never owned but liked the look of. I stood on the sidewalk of Midtown Manhattan, surrounded by the rush of people going to jobs that defined them. For the first time in my life, I had no title. I was not the fixer. I was not the senior associate. I was just the crazy daughter of a crook. The pain was sharp and physical, like a knife between the ribs. They had taken my home. Now they had taken my work. I went back to my fortress in the financial district. I sat in the dark for 1 hour. I allowed myself exactly 60 minutes of self-pity, then the hour ended. Okay, I said to the empty room. If you want to play in the mud, let us play. I opened my laptop. I accessed the Arsenal partition. For months, I had been building a dossier. It contained everything. The falsified tax returns, the emails instructing me to bribe health inspectors, the invoices for the silence of my brother's victims, the logs of the bot farms my sister used, and most damning of all, the bank transfer records showing the movement of the pension funds to the Cayman Islands, authorized by Robert Asherton's personal key. I did not release it to the press. The press could be bought or sued into silence. I released it to the world. I used a server based in Iceland to host a simple, static website. I called it the Family Balance Sheet. I uploaded 3 gigabytes of data. I redacted my own name from the documents, replacing it with the accountant, but I left every other name exposed. I included a simple introductory text. Here is the true cost of the Asherton Empire. It was not built on innovation. It was built on theft. Judge for yourself. I hit publish. Then, I sent the link to the tip lines of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Department of Justice, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. I sat back and watched the dominoes fall. It happened with terrifying speed. At 2 p.m, the website crashed due to traffic. I mirrored it to 3 backup servers. At 3 p.m, the hashtag Asherton Files began to trend. People were combing through the documents. They found the receipts for Victoria's ivory collection. They found the settlements for Leo's car accidents. They found the emails where Robert referred to his investors as gullible sheep. By 4 o'clock, the stock market reacted. Asherton Holdings did not just dip. It plummeted. It lost 40% of its value in 30 minutes. Trading was halted by the exchange due to volatility. The phone calls started. Not to me, I had changed my number again, but to the people who mattered. I watched the news on 3 different screens. Breaking news. Asherton investors panic as leak. Reveals massive fraud. I saw a reporter standing outside the Asherton townhouse. The door opened, and my mother, Victoria, stepped out. She was not wearing her usual Chanel armor. She looked disheveled. She was trying to get into a waiting car. But a crowd of people, former employees, cheated investors, was shouting at her, "Where's the pension money?" "Victoria," someone screamed. She looked at the camera, her eyes wide with terror. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that the script I used to write for her was gone. She had no lines. She scrambled into the car, slamming the door. An hour later, a press release was issued by the New York Charity Coalition. It was brief, effective immediately. Victoria Asherton has been removed from the board of directors and stripped of her honorary titles due to ethical concerns. Her social currency was demonetized instantly. She was no longer a philanthropist. She was a pariah. Then came Leo. my brother, the golden boy who believed laws were merely suggestions. With the family in chaos, the usual protection detail, the drivers, the fixers, the people I used to hire to follow him and clean up his messes was gone. He was driving himself. He was driving his remaining sports car, a bright yellow Lamborghini, through the Holland Tunnel. He was speeding. He was erratic. Usually, if he was pulled over, he would call me. I would call the police chief. The ticket would disappear. But tonight, when the flashing lights appeared behind him, he had no one to call. The police pulled him over. They found him agitated and sweating. They searched the car, without me there to sweep the vehicle every week. The accumulation of his vices was sitting in plain sight, in the glove box. They found 50 grams of cocaine, in the trunk. They found unregistered firearms. This was not a traffic violation. This was a felony. I watched the footage on the evening news. Leo was not fighting the cops this time. He was crying. He was handcuffed and shoved into the back of a cruiser. The headline read, "Asherton heir arrested on federal drug and weapons charges. Bail denied." He was going to Rikers Island, and this time, there was no checkbook large enough to get him out. My father was the last standing pillar. Robert Asherton was holed up in his office in Midtown. He was refusing to speak to the press, but the walls were closing in. The leaked documents regarding the pension fund were black and white. There was no nuance. It was theft. However, a cornered animal is dangerous. And Robert Asherton was not just fighting the law. He was fighting for survival. At 8 o'clock that night, I received a package. It was not delivered by a courier. It was left outside my apartment door, right in the hallway of my secure building. That meant someone had bypassed the doorman, someone with professional skills. I opened the door carefully. It was a small, plain cardboard box. I brought it inside and put on gloves. I opened it. Inside was a single charred brick, and taped to the brick was a photo. It was a photo of me, taken that morning, walking out of Oberon Strategy with my box of belongings. On the back of the photo, a message was scrawled in black marker. "The fire missed you last time. It won't miss twice. Return the money or burn." It was not from my father. Robert would never get his hands dirty with a brick. It was from his partners, the people he owed money to, the private lenders, like Vargas. My father, in his desperation, must have told them that I had the money. He had painted a target on my back to take the heat off himself. He had told these dangerous men that his daughter was the one holding their cash. I sat down on the floor. The brick smelled of sulfur and gasoline. Fear is a cold thing. It starts in the toes and works its way up until your heart feels like it is beating in a block of ice. I was alone. I had no job. I had no family. And now, there were men with guns looking for me because my father had sold me out to save his own skin. This was the reality of revenge. It wasn't cinematic. It was lonely. It was terrifying. I could stop. I could call the FBI, hand over the confession, and go into witness protection. I could disappear to a farm in Nebraska and live out my days as a nobody. But then I looked at the charred brick. I thought about the night of the fire. I thought about the champagne. I thought about the laugh. They wanted me to burn. They wanted me to be afraid. I stood up. I walked to the window. The city lights were blurring in the rain. I was done with defense. I was done with leaking documents and hoping the system would work. The system was too slow. Robert was already maneuvering, blaming the leak on hackers, blaming the theft on me. He was preparing a counter-narrative for a press conference the next day. He was going to claim that I was the mastermind, and he was the victim. I needed to end this. Not next month, not next week, tomorrow. I picked up the phone. I dialed Agent Miller at the FBI. "Agent Miller," I said, "I am done negotiating. You want Robert Asherton. You want the whole network. I will give them to you. We are listening." "Miss Asherton," Miller replied, "my father is holding a press conference tomorrow at noon to address the allegations." I said, "He thinks he is going to spin his way out of this. He thinks he can blame me. And I will be there," I said, my voice hardening into something resembling steel. "I am going to walk onto that stage, And I am not going empty-handed. I am bringing the confession. I am bringing the wire transfer logs. And I am bringing you. Isla, that is dangerous, Miller warned. If these threats against you are real. They are real, I interrupted, looking at the brick on my table. That is why we have to finish it now. I am not hiding anymore. If they want a fire, I will give them the sun. I hung up. I went to my closet. I pulled out the white suit I had bought for my promotion ceremony, the one that never happened. It was pristine, sharp. I hung it on the door. Tomorrow was the anniversary of the fire. 1 year exactly. It was poetic. My mother had laughed when my house burned down. Tomorrow. I would make sure that when their world burned, no one would be laughing. I would be the one holding the match, and I would look them in the eye while I dropped it. The storm was over, the hurricane was here, and its name was Isla. November 23rd. The date was etched into my bones. Exactly 1 year ago. To the hour. I had stood barefoot in the freezing rain, watching my life incinerate while my family toasted to my misfortune. The universe has a sense of irony. But justice requires timing. I was standing in the wings of the grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel. The air conditioning was set to a frigid 65 degrees, but the room was sweating. My father, Robert Asherton, had called this press conference to set the record straight. He had invited every major news outlet in New York, promising a revelation that would vindicate Asherton Holdings and expose the true criminal behind the collapse of the empire. He was standing at the podium now. I watched him from the shadows. Flanked by Agent Miller and a team of 6 federal officers, Robert looked the part of the aggrieved patriarch. He was wearing a navy suit, his hair perfectly silvered, his face arranged in a mask of sorrowful reluctance. Beside him sat my mother, Victoria, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. Robert leaned into the microphone. His voice was steady, practiced, the voice of a man who believed his own lies. "It breaks a father's heart to do this," Robert said, looking directly into the camera lens. "For months, we have tried to protect our daughter, Isla. We have hidden her struggles with mental illness. We have covered up her gambling debts. We tried to get her help, but the release of the stolen company documents yesterday was the final straw." He paused, letting the shutter clicks fill the silence. "The truth is," he continued, his voice dropping to a tragic whisper, "Isla embezzled the pension fund. She used her access as our accountant to siphon off $15 million. She framed me. She framed her mother. And when we confronted her, she threatened to burn down this company just like she burned down her own apartment." A gasp rippled through the room. It was a masterful performance. He was flipping the narrative, using the fire, the very tragedy he had mocked, as proof of my instability. "We are cooperating fully with the authorities to bring her to justice," Robert concluded, reaching for my mother's hand. "We just want our daughter to be safe, even if that means she must be in custody." Agent Miller looked at me. He checked his watch. "It is time, Miss Asherton," he said. I adjusted the lapels of my white suit. It was stark, sharp, and unapologetic. It was the color of a blank page. "Let's go," I said. We did not sneak in. We walked through the double doors at the back of the room. The sound of heavy boots hitting the parquet floor cut through the murmur of the press. One reporter turned, then 2. Then the entire room swung around. The cameras swiveled, the lenses finding me like hungry eyes. Isla Asherton, the fugitive, the arsonist, the thief, but I was not in handcuffs. I was walking at the head of a phalanx of federal agents. I walked straight down the center aisle. The sea of reporters parted for me. I saw the confusion on their faces. Why was the FBI walking with the suspect, not dragging her on stage? Robert froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mother dropped her handkerchief. Her eyes went wide, fixing on the badge hanging from Agent Miller's belt. I stopped at the foot of the stage. The silence was absolute. You could hear the hum of the video cameras. "Hello, Father," I said. My voice was not amplified, but in the dead silence, it carried to the back of the room. You can stop the performance now. The reviews are in. Robert gripped the podium. His knuckles were white. Isla, what are you doing here? You are trespassing. Security. He looked around for the hotel security, but they had already been relieved by the federal team securing the perimeter. I am not trespassing, I said. Walking up the stairs to the stage, the click of my heels was a metronome counting down the seconds of his life. I am here to accept your invitation. You wanted the authorities, I brought them. I stood next to him at the podium. I was taller than him in my heels. I looked out at the blinding lights. Then I turned to face him. You told them I stole the $15 million, I said, loud enough for the microphones to catch. You did, Robert shouted, trying to regain control, playing to the cameras. You have the codes. You admitted it to me 2 nights ago. You signed a confession. He was doubling down. He was trying to use the trap I had sprung on him in Part 7. I smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. I did sign a paper, Robert, I said. But it wasn't a confession. I turned to Agent Miller. He stepped forward, pulling a document from his jacket. He placed it on the podium, right over Robert's prepared speech. Mr. Asherton, Miller said, his voice booming. This is a federal warrant for your arrest. Robert laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. Arrest on what grounds? My daughter is the criminal here. The charge is conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, and the embezzlement of $15 million from the Asherton Employee Retirement Trust. Miller read, and we are adding a charge of attempted obstruction of justice based on the recording provided by your daughter. Robert went pale. Recording. I was wearing a wire too. Dad, I said softly. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse standing upright. That is impossible, he whispered. You were alone. I have been cooperating with the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Federal Bureau of Investigation for 30 days, I said. I didn't steal the money. Robert, I tracked it, and in exchange for handing over the entire digital history of your empire, every bribe, every tax evasion, every forged signature, I have been granted full immunity. I leaned into the microphone. I am not the defendant, I said to the world. I am the witness. The room exploded. Flashbulbs went off like strobe lights. Reporters were shouting questions. Is it true? Do you have proof? Is the company bankrupt? Robert stumbled back. He looked at the agents closing in on him. He looked at the exit, but it was blocked. No, he stammered. No, this is a mistake. I have a deal, I know people. You have the right to remain silent, Agent Miller said. Snapping the handcuffs onto Robert's wrists, the metallic click-click was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I suggest you use it. My father, the man who believed he owned the world, was bent over the podium, his hands cuffed behind his back. Then, the screaming started. Victoria. My mother had been sitting in her chair, frozen in shock. But as the reality hit her, the handcuffs, the cameras, the end of her life, she snapped. The veneer of the elegant socialite dissolved, revealing the feral creature underneath. She did not run to her husband. She ran at me. You bitch, she shrieked. It happened fast. She lunged across the stage, her nails aiming for my face. She was a blur of expensive silk and rage. You ungrateful little devil, you killed us. You killed this family. She struck me. Her hand connected with my shoulder, her nails tearing the fabric of my white suit. She raised her hand again to claw my eyes out. Agent Miller moved to intercept her, but I held up a hand. Wait, I ordered. I did not move. I did not flinch. I stood perfectly still, letting the cameras roll. Victoria was hysterical. She was grabbing my lapels, shaking me, screaming obscenities that would be beeped out on the evening news. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure hatred. I gave you everything, she screamed, spit flying from her mouth. We let you live in that penthouse. We gave you a job, and this is how you repay us, by ratting us out. You are garbage. You are nothing. I looked down at her. I looked at the woman who had cared more about her gala appearance than my life, while I stood shivering on the street 1 year ago. I let the world see her. I let the live stream capture every ounce of her venom. I let them see that the victim narrative was a lie. Then, I moved. I reached up and gently took her wrists. My grip was iron. I pulled her hands off my suit. I leaned in close. The camera zoomed in. The room went quiet, waiting for my reaction. Was I going to cry? Was I going to hit her back? I brought my face inches from hers. I looked deep into her eyes, which were wild with panic and fury. "Mother?" I whispered. She stopped screaming, panting heavily, staring at me. 1 year ago, I said, my voice low, intimate, just for her and the microphones. You stood on a balcony and laughed while my house burned down. You said it was God cleaning up a mess. I gestured to the agents surrounding my father, to the handcuffs, to the ruins of their reputation. Now I am not laughing, I said. I am just watching the news. Victoria's face crumbled. The rage vanished, replaced by a hollow, devastating realization. She looked at Robert in cuffs. She looked at the press. She looked at me. She collapsed. She didn't faint. She just gave up. She sank to the floor, sobbing into her hands, a heap of ruined luxury. "Get her up," Agent Miller signaled to a female officer. They hauled Victoria to her feet. She was limp, catatonic. They cuffed her. "Victoria Asherton," the officer recited, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and aiding and abetting." I turned away. I did not want to watch. I had seen enough. I walked to the edge of the stage. Below me, the press was a frenzy of questions. Isla. What will happen to the company? Did you plan this from the beginning? How do you feel about sending your parents to prison? I looked at them. I looked at the red lights of the cameras. The Asherton family business is closed, I said simply. Permanently. I walked down the stairs. The agents formed a wedge around me, not to keep me in, but to clear a path for me to get out. I walked past my father as they were leading him away. He looked at me. His eyes were dead. There was no anger left, just the shock of a man who had walked off a cliff and finally hit the bottom. "Isla," he croaked. I did not break stride. I did not look at him. He was a ghost. I pushed through the double doors of the ballroom and out into the lobby of the plaza. The hotel guests were stopping to stare. The doorman held the main doors open. I stepped out onto Fifth Avenue. It was night, and, just like 1 year ago, it was raining. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement, creating a kaleidoscope of gold and neon. A wall of paparazzi was waiting outside, alerted by the chaos inside. As I emerged, 1,000 flashbulbs erupted. Pop, pop, pop. The light was blinding. It washed over me in waves of white-hot intensity. 1 year ago, I had stood in this light, shivering, barefoot, covered in soot, watching my life burn while the world looked on with indifference. I had been a victim. I had been a punchline. Tonight, the light was the same, the rain was the same, the city was the same, but I was different. I stood on the steps, the flashes illuminating my white suit, making it glow against the dark night. I did not shield my eyes. I did not hide my face. I looked straight into the blinding glare. I took a deep breath of the cold, wet air. It didn't smell of smoke anymore. It smelled of ozone and rain and something else. It smelled of clean slate. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. Agent Miller opened the back door. "Miss Asherton," he said, "we need to get you to the debriefing." I looked back at the hotel one last time. I saw the police lights swirling, casting blue and red shadows on the stone facade. I saw my parents being led out in handcuffs, heads bowed, shoved into the back of squad cars. The empire was gone. The castle had fallen. I turned my back on them. "I am ready," I said. I climbed into the car. The door slammed shut, sealing out the noise, the rain, and the flashing lights, as the car pulled away, merging into the river of traffic. I did not look back at the rearview mirror. There was nothing behind me worth saving. I watched the city stream past my window. a blur of motion and light. For the first time in 32 years, I did not know what I was going to do tomorrow. I had no crises to manage. I had no secrets to keep. I had no one to save. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. A single tear leaked out, hot and fast, tracking down my cheek. It wasn't for them. It was for the girl who had burned in that penthouse. "Rest in peace," I whispered to her. Then I opened my eyes, and I watched the road ahead. The silence that follows a hurricane is heavy. It has a physical weight, pressing down on the ears, dense with the humidity of things that have been washed away. It had been 7 days since the arrest, 168 hours since the Asherton Empire. A monolith that had stood in New York society for half a century was reduced to a stack of evidence boxes in a federal warehouse. The dismantling happened with the efficiency of a butcher dressing a carcass. I watched it from a distance, like a pedestrian watching a demolition crew. The FBI seized the townhouse on the Upper East Side. They put yellow tape across the mahogany doors. The cars were towed, hooked up like common wrecks. The Lamborghini, the Bentley, the Rolls-Royce, they were all hauled off to a government impound lot in New Jersey, where they would sit until they were auctioned off to pay for the lawyers my parents could no longer afford. The name Asherton was scrubbed from the charity boards. The Asherton wing at the hospital was quietly renamed overnight. The Society Friends, the ones who had eaten their food and drunk their wine for decades, vanished into the woodwork, giving interviews about how they always suspected something was wrong. It was a total, systemic erasure. On Monday morning, I returned to Oberon Strategy. I did not know what to expect. I had been suspended. I had been labeled a liability. But when I walked through the glass doors, the atmosphere was different. The receptionist, usually chatty, went silent and nodded respectfully. The junior associate stopped talking as I passed. I walked to Elias's office. He was on the phone, but he hung up immediately when he saw me. "Isla," he said. He did not smile. He did not offer condolences. He looked at me with a new expression. It was not pity. It was a mixture of fear and awe. "The suspension is lifted," he said, sliding a file across his desk. "The Tokyo team is waiting for your instructions. They are terrified of you." "Good," I said, taking the file. "You know what they are calling you?" Elias asked, leaning back in his chair. "In the industry, they are calling you the firewall because nothing gets past you, and if someone tries to cross you, they get burned." I looked at him. "I did not burn anyone. Elias, I just stopped putting out their fires." "It is the same thing," he said. "Welcome back." I went to my office. It was exactly as I had left it. But it felt different. It was no longer a refuge. It was just a room. I sat in my ergonomic chair, the one I had spent thousands of hours in, managing crises for other people. I looked at the skyline. I was a legend now. I was the woman who had taken down her own corrupt dynasty to save her integrity. I had won, but victory, I discovered, tastes remarkably like cold water. It is clean, it is necessary, but it has no flavor. On Wednesday, the phone rang. It was not a client. It was the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. "Inmate number 74290 requests a visit," the automated voice said. "Do you accept?" It was my father. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. My mother? I could have said no. I could have blocked the number. I had immunity. I had a restraining order if I wanted one. I owed them nothing. But curiosity is a stubborn ghost. I wanted to see them, not to gloat, not to yell. I wanted to see who they were when the costumes were taken away. I wanted to see if there was anything real underneath the layers of lies I had spent my life polishing. I went on Friday afternoon. The visiting room was a depressing expanse of linoleum and fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry flies. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and stale despair. I sat on a metal stool, separated from the other side by a thick sheet of plexiglass. They brought them out separately, but the effect was the same. Robert Asherton walked in first. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. His silver hair, usually perfectly coiffed, was flat and greasy, without his Italian suit, without his watch, without the power of his checkbook. He looked small. He looked like an old man who had gotten lost on the way to the grocery store. He sat down. He picked up the receiver. "Isla," he said. His voice was raspy. "You have to get me out of here. The food is inedible, and the lawyer, this public defender, he is an idiot. He says I'm looking at 20 years. 20 years. Isla, I will die in here." I looked at him. I searched his eyes for a flicker of remorse. I searched for a hint of, "I am sorry I tried to frame you." I searched for, "I am sorry I stole the pension fund." There was nothing. There was only the same narcissistic panic I had managed for 32 years. "Did you do it, Robert?" I asked quietly. "Do what?" he snapped. "It was a loan I told you. If you hadn't gone to the feds, I would have put it back. This is your fault. You overreacted." He was shouting now, his face reddening. "You ungrateful child, I built that company for you, and you destroyed it because of what? Some moral high ground. You are just jealous because I was the visionary and you were just the accountant." I listened. I let his words wash over me like rain on a raincoat. They didn't penetrate. "I didn't destroy it, Robert," I said calmly. "I just turned on the lights." He kept screaming until the guard tapped him on the shoulder. He was dragged away, still shouting about his legacy, still blaming the world for the gravity of his own actions. Then came Victoria. She looked worse than him, without her makeup, without her Botox maintenance. Her face had collapsed into a map of wrinkles and bitterness. She sat down and stared at me. She didn't pick up the phone at first. She just glared. When she finally lifted the receiver, her voice was a hiss. "Are you happy?" she asked. "I am sleeping on a cot. I have to wear used underwear. Are you happy?" "Isla." "I am not happy, Mother," I said. "I am just tired." "You should be ashamed," she spat. "We are your family. Family sticks together. We protect each other. That is the rule." "You didn't protect me," I said. "You laughed when I burned. You tried to sell me to a loan shark. You tried to make me an accomplice to fraud." "That was business," she shrieked, slamming her hand against the glass. "You are so sensitive. You always were. You take everything so personally. We would have fixed it. We always fix it." I stared at her, and in that moment, the final shackle broke. I realized they were not monsters. Monsters are calculated. Monsters have depth. My parents were not monsters. They were toddlers. They were aging, dangerous toddlers who believed the world existed solely to serve their needs. They possessed a toxic innocence, a belief that they were the protagonists of the universe and everyone else was just a prop. They were incapable of guilt. Because they were incapable of empathy, they would never change. They would sit in these cells for the rest of their lives, telling themselves they were victims of a cruel daughter. "I brought you something," I said. Victoria's eyes lit up. "Money? Did you put money in the commissary account? I need moisturizer. The soap here is drying out my skin." "No," I said. "I brought you goodbye." I hung up the phone. I stood up. Victoria was screaming behind the glass. She was mouthing words. Ungrateful, bitch, money, help. I turned my back on her. I walked out of the room, down the long gray corridor, through the heavy steel doors that clanged shut with the sound of a vault locking. I walked out into the sunlight. It was blinding. I got into my car. It was a modest sedan I had rented. I didn't own a car anymore. I didn't own anything except my clothes and my freedom. I drove out of the city. I didn't go back to the office. I drove north, toward the old neighborhood. I found myself parked in front of the lot where my building used to stand. The debris had been cleared months ago. The blackened bricks, the melted steel, the remnants of my grandmother's curtains. It was all gone. Now, it was just a square of earth in the middle of a block of high-rises. It had rained recently, and the weeds had taken over. It was a lush, chaotic explosion of green, dandelions, crabgrass, wild clover. It was messy, it was unkempt, and it was alive. I stood on the sidewalk, looking through the chain-link fence. For a year, I had mourned the house. I had mourned the safety it represented. I had thought that rebuilding it was the goal. I thought that if I could just get back to where I was, I would be okay. But looking at the green weeds pushing through the soil, I realized I was wrong. I didn't need to rebuild the penthouse. The penthouse was a cage. It was a gilded box where I kept their secrets and hid my own pain. The fire hadn't taken my life. It had cleared the ground. I realized I didn't want to be the legend at Oberon Strategy. I didn't want to be the fixer anymore. I didn't want to spend the next 30 years cleaning up other people's messes just because I was good at it. I walked back to the car. I started the engine. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and burning orange. It was beautiful. I drove onto the highway, heading west. I didn't have a destination. Maybe I would go to the coast. Maybe I would drive until the road ran out. My phone rang. It was sitting on the passenger seat. I glanced at the screen. It was a number I didn't recognize. Probably a new client. Probably someone who had heard the legend of Isla Asherton and wanted to pay me a fortune to bury their sins. I let it ring, 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 ring. I thought about answering it. I thought about the money. I thought about the career. Then, I thought about the weeds growing in the empty lot. I reached over and picked up the phone. I rolled down the window. The wind roared into the car, cold and loud and chaotic. I didn't answer the call. I didn't check the voicemail. I threw the phone out the window. It tumbled through the air. A small black rectangle spinning against the sunset. It hit the asphalt at 70 miles per hour. I saw it shatter in the rearview mirror, exploding into 100 pieces of plastic and glass. The connection was severed. The SIM card that held the contacts of the lawyers, the press, the clients, and the ghosts of my family was gone. Silence filled the car. Real silence. Not the silence of a held breath, but the silence of an open road. I was 33 years old. I had no home. I had no job. I had no family. I was completely, utterly alone. And for the first time in my entire life, I smiled. A real smile. It started in my chest and warmed my face. I turned up the radio. I pressed my foot down on the accelerator. I drove toward the horizon, where the sun was burning itself out to make way for the stars. The rearview mirror was empty. The windshield was full. I was finally, beautifully, free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I poured a century of experience into crafting every twist and turn of Isla's journey, and I hope it resonated with you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city like New York? Or somewhere quiet and peaceful? Please leave a comment below to share your location and your thoughts on Isla's final decision. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel Sunday Drama Stories, liking this video, and hitting that hype button so we can share this journey with even more listeners. Your support means the world. Stay safe and stay free.